Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Ant-Man went off, but the Nuggets had the last laugh and tied the series up at 2. Also, the Pacers absolutely dominated the Knicks to even their series, and the improbable happened for the Hawks. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
It was a weekend of evening in the NBA playoffs. 2-2, the common number. Now, Nuggets, Timberwolves, back level as each team has taken 2 games off the other's home court. It was a 115-107 Nuggets win in Game 4. Matt Moore from Locked On Nuggets joins me now. And Matt, this is a Timberwolves team that overwhelmed the Nuggets in the first 2 games, athleticism, length. And then in the last 2, the Denver Nuggets found answers. What were those answers?
I think there's a number of them. I think part of it was just mental, about them really deciding to go ahead and get up for the fight and stop expecting things to be easy. I think challenging back the Wolves on both ends of the floor. Nikola Jokic in particular has been incredible defensively. And that sounds crazy to say. Go check out the steals and blocks, but if you don't want that, go check out the tape. You'll see it. He's getting his hand in pick and roll situations. He's contesting at the rim. He wasn't doing any of that in the first 2 games, and the Nuggets have responded. And I think in Game 3, Jokic was actually pretty passive in the first half, and Jamal Murray got loose. And then in the second half, Jokic kind of got going. And this one, Jokic came out of the gate just absolutely dominating and was amazing throughout the game. And when Jokic is the best player in the series, the Nuggets are usually going to win. But that said, the Wolves are having a hard time with the Nuggets bench as well. Justin Holiday giving them huge minutes off of the bench. The biggest adjustment, though, for me, Peter, I got to say, is the Nuggets have made small tactical adjustments. They've started attacking Naz Reid specifically in pick and rolls and dribble handoffs empty side to force him into space with Jamal Murray. And when they're compensating for that after Murray gets going, then Murray's passing, and that switched in Game 4. He got going with passing, so they started focusing more on his passing, and then he got the scoring in the third quarter. The Wolves had everything figured out in those first 2 games, but they are wearing out trying to keep up with the tactical adjustments from Denver, and that to me has been the biggest difference through 4 games.
Yeah, Anthony Edwards goes off again in this one, 44 points. And what's crazy is, Matt, the Timberwolves won his minutes +5, and he played 45 minutes, and they lose this game by 8 points. And it's to your point, it was the bench. They could not get anything going with this bench. When Anthony Edwards is not out there, this team is in trouble. Was that something that you felt like the Nasri part is defensive or for the Nuggets offense, but in terms of defending the Wolves, what has changed there?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just, the Nuggets have started playing lots of wings, right? It's Christian Brown, it's Justin Holiday. You don't see as many players in the rotation for Denver. Really Peyton Watson doesn't play tonight, kind of excites him. So they're down to an 8-man rotation. And a lot of it, honestly, is just like Justin Holiday's playing great. Like, he's contesting, he's flying, he's making extra rotations. Christian Brown's brought that defensive energy, but also in those bench minutes, a lot of them is Aaron Gordon is playing the 5, and his defense tonight was absolutely fantastic. He was incredible on both ends. But
added 27 points in this one. 27
points, was 10 of 10 at one point. He's hitting threes, which if that's happening, if you're the Wolves, you just got to throw your hands up. I think a lot of it is honestly Gordon's ability to play in those type of situations. They have committed a lot to not getting run over. But I'll also say this, Chris Finch is going to have to tighten up the rotation. Like, I get it. You had a great bench all year. You have the 6th man of the year. I understand that. I think Naz Reid does need to play. Kyle Anderson can't. And if they're going to get nothing from Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 1 of 7, they're just not going to have enough offense versus the Nuggets, who will play Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon in those staggered lineups. So they've got a lot to figure out here as the series moves back to Denver.
Yeah, both teams essentially played a 7-man rotation. This one, Kyle Anderson, you mentioned 6 minutes. Reggie Jackson played just 9 minutes for the Nuggets. So each team really tightening this down to 7. All right, best of 3. How do you handicap this best of 3 now?
Well, I guess it just depends on who can win a game on their own floor. That's when the series starts. Given what we've seen in the series so far,
it turned the old adage on its head.
Yeah, I don't think the Wolves are done here. I just don't. Look, it really was, if you look at it, they lose by 8. It was entirely that second quarter meltdown at the end of the half. That's what it was. People are talking about Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert is +9 in this game. They're -17 without him. Like, they're winning the starter minutes. Nikola Jokic was incredible tonight. Sensational, amazing, unbelievable. 15 of 26 for 35 points, 7 boards, 7 assists. They won his minutes by 3. The Wolves are putting all that work in. They just need a little tightening, and they will be right back in this. But I think as we're seeing, the Wolves absolutely dominated them for 2 games. The Nuggets got the edge on them in Minnesota. And now it's going to be, I think, a real back and forth tension battle in these last 3 games. I really think we're headed towards 7. I think it's going to be a classic series.
Quickly here, Matt, there has been some discussion burbling that this is the finals that we're watching. How do you feel about that?
I think that both these teams have an excellent chance against the Boston Celtics. I also think the teams that have to go through these types of series get something taken out of them. And Boston, meanwhile, has a cakewalk to the finals. So that's going to be a huge edge for them. But as far as like the quality of basketball teams in playoff environments, yeah, I think these are probably the 2 best teams equipped to win the title.
Stay up to date all year on the Denver Nuggets by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Nuggets on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, the Pacers dominated and brought the series with the Knicks down to a best of 3. Before we get to how they did it, Shohei Ohtani didn't play in a loss on Sunday. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. With zone deals, you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for big-time savings. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Dodgers dropped the series with the Padres as Shohei Ohtani was held out of the lineup with back tightness.
Yu Darvish today was too much for the Dodgers. 7 innings, just 2 hits, no runs, 7 Ks, and 1 walk. And Walker Buehler just doesn't have it yet. He's not ready to be back in the major leagues, I think. He has struggled his first couple of outings. Today, he gave up back-to-back home runs in the first inning. And all of a sudden, just like that. I mean, I feel like yesterday we were pounding our chest. And even after the Friday night loss, everything kind of still felt okay. But Shohei Ohtani sits down with a tight back. And we look at the lineup and we say, well, Mookie Betts has been struggling a little bit. Will Smith has been struggling a little bit. Max Muncy is like, for whatever. I don't even know, 15 or something since the homestand, since they left to come to, he didn't do anything in San Diego. And what I find interesting about that is they know that. They threw out a stat, I think it was on Friday night, that Max Muncy against the Padres in San Diego Petco was 9 for 80. I don't care who is pitching. If a guy is 9 for 80 in a certain area, guess what? He's on the bench.
Elsewhere on the Diamonds, the Mets got a 2-run big fly from Brandon Nimmo to wall it off against the Braves on Mother's Day.
Well, it looks like the New York Mets have found a recipe to get their star players to deliver late in games just don't start him. Francisco Lindor had his flu game where he had 2 huge hits off the bench, including a walk-off. And tonight it was Brandon Nimmo. Came off the bench in the 7th inning as a pinch runner. He made a fantastic catch going into the wall in the 8th inning and then had his opportunity to come up in the bottom of the 9th inning with the Mets down 1, and he delivered a massive walk-off 2-run homer to help the Mets avoid getting swept by the Braves. It was not a great weekend for the Mets, but they end on a positive note. I'll be breaking down everything that we saw against the Braves and previewing what lies ahead against the Phillies on tomorrow's edition of Locked On Mets.
And the Cubs won a weird series over the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Sunday was a very, very weird baseball game. And if the Cubs lost, it would have been one of the most unjust, ridiculous results. And I know you're an old school baseball guy, and I mostly am too. And I get a little tired of the stat casts and the exit velo and the perceived batting average and all that great stuff. But for 2 hours on Sunday morning/afternoon, the Cubs just continued to hit rocket after rocket after rocket into glove after glove after glove. Seiya Suzuki should turn this tape in, and it should be the title of Here's Why You Should Never Play Baseball. He went 0 for 5 and stung the ball beautifully 3 to 4 times and hit a home run, but I think the Pirates were messing with the balls or something. It was a really weird weekend on that front.
And the Cavaliers may be shorthanded tonight. Donovan Mitchell is questionable because of a left calf strain. Mitchell had 33 points in 43 minutes in Game 3, but appeared to be limping in the fourth quarter of Cleveland's 106-93 loss to Boston on Saturday night. Also questionable to play, center Jared Allen, who has missed the past 6 playoff games due to a bruised rib. The Cavs are up against the ropes as they trail the series 2-1 to the Celtics. The Indiana Pacers were inhospitable Mother's Day guests on Sunday. In fact, by the end, the Knicks might have been crying for their mommies. A 121-89 win over an albeit depleted New York Knicks team. The Indiana Pacers have now squared this series 2 games to peace. Tony East in the arena post-game from Locked On Pacers joins me now. And Tony, everything flipped when the series moved to Indiana. Is this as simple as Knicks just too banged up to hang?
That's certainly a part of it, right? OG Anunoby didn't play in either of these games here in Indy, and he was so huge in Game 2, 28 points and every defensive thing you could want if you're New York. But I mean, the Pacers have played a lot better, to their own credit, too. I mean, Halliburton had his best playoff game in Game 3 tonight. I don't even know what to say, really, about tonight. They just – their defense – the Pacers' defense, are you kidding? I mean, they held them to 89-14 in the first quarter. Like, I get that Anunoby was a good scorer, but that's one of their best defensive performances of the season. Like, they've really upped their level on both ends, even against a depleted Knicks team. And tonight was the first time, I think, Josh Hart kind of alluded to it in his post-game presser that, they've got to be better and more energetic as the Knicks, and that's what the Pacers are. They're going to come at you with energy and speed for 48. It's tough. It's the war of attrition, as people have called it, maybe catching up. We'll see how they respond with their home crowd behind them. But Pacers had energy for 48. The Knicks did not tonight.
Yeah, and this was a game that was all but over at halftime. Nearly 7 points in the first half for the Pacers, and it came with about as balanced a scoring attack as you can have. 5 Pacers in double figures, no one more than 20 points. But as you mentioned, it was the defense. Was this something that goes beyond defensive effort and energy, or was there something that you felt like structurally changed? What was the difference here defensively?
Yeah, it's been a little better. They put Aaron Nesmith on Jalen Brunson starting in Game 3. That's been effective for them. And I was curious after that game if it was, Brunson's foot injury or something Nesmith in particular was doing. But he looked great again defensively in this game. It's just split second longer at Brunson thinking about what he has to do and how he has to do it. And Nesmith's done a great job at providing length and athleticism on the ball. And in this game, they added to that better team rotations onto Dante DiVincenzo, who's been – holy smokes, good. This whole playoffs, lights out, over 50% from 3 every game. Tonight, he finally wasn't just the best shooter on the planet for a game. 1 for 6 from deep. He was 3 for 13. So you put those two in tandem, even if you get good games from other guys, the Knicks just can't score enough. So they were more focused on a game plan on Brunson and DiVincenzo. Now I think it's up to the Knicks to try to find ways to to get off of those matchups or to get better matchups elsewhere, but it's tough with their limited resources, right? That's kind of what they've been running into this whole series. So I think it might just be, can Brunson be better, or the Pacers actually have something here, because they've been held the Knicks under 110 the last 2 games. They've done a lot better on that end.
Yeah, and defensively, this was something you and I talked about through the Bucks series as well. I mean, their defensive intensity at times was suffocating against Milwaukee. We saw it on Sunday. It was suffocating against the Knicks. Say whatever you want about the diminished version. Like OG Anunoby is not a primary ball handler anyway. Like that's not going to be the difference between winning and losing in these games. And so is this just Rick Carlisle pushing the right buttons, a defensive mindset? Like, how do you think they've been able to flip the switch, not just in this game, but this whole postseason?
Yeah, it's kind of odd to just throw it at people all of a sudden in the postseason. Like, they were better on defense after the All-Star break this season. And the big reason for that, and their best defensive stretches this season, came when they got bigger. And Siakam is a big player. And he specifically is not like the best defender ever, but he makes everybody else have a more natural defensive assignment. Aaron Nesmith's playing the 3 instead of the 4. Andrew Nembhard's playing the 2 instead of the 3. So that is step 1 of their defense being better. And step 2, in this series specifically, they have that size plus Obi Toppin plus Isaiah Jackson. They have a size advantage all the time against this Knicks team, especially with Randall and Bogdanovich and Mitchell Robinson out. And size is king in the NBA so much of the time. Skilled size is what Rick Carlisle talks about taking over the league. So that's been really vital for them defensively in this series. And you can see that they often have, the mismatch is Pascal Siakam's guarded by Josh Hart, and he's guarding someone smaller than him. Like, that's a good recipe for success, and they've rode that these last couple games.
Stay up to date on the Indiana Pacers all year by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Pacers on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the Hawks had the improbable happen to them on Mother's Day. The Hawks had a terribly tiny chance at landing the number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft lottery. Locked On Hawks host Brad Rowland celebrates Atlanta beating the odds.
The Hawks got very lucky here. They had a 3% chance to draft number 1 overall, which means they had a 97% chance not to be in the number 1 spot. They had an 86% chance to not be in the top 4 anywhere. And as soon as the Hawks did not appear in the bottom 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 picks in the lottery drawing, we knew. I was actually on a Twitter space live at the time. And I was like, well, they're jumping up to the top 4. We already knew that. It happened. And then just a few minutes later, word broke and they were number 1 overall. So number 1, extremely lucky to be here. The Hawks had a not terrible, but certainly annoying, frustrating, kind of brutal season overall that ended up with a early play and exit, lots of injuries, lots of underperformance. They were certainly well below expectations this year. And that led to a lot of just like questions and decisions. And look, a lot of that still applies. This is still a team that is entering the offseason that could be a lot different going into next season, which has been the case for a while. If you listen to this podcast for a while, you'll note that I talked about that they have to make choices at center. They have to make a choice in the backcourt probably. Because I still am of the belief, generally speaking, that they need to break up the Trey and DeJounte pairing. That's been the case for a while now around the league. Most people believe that that's probably going to be the case, or at least could be the case in the near future. They have financial decisions to make in the near future as well. But, big picture, winning the lottery is a good thing.
There is something perfect, yes, in a cruel way, if you're a Hawks fan, about the Hawks getting the number 1 pick in a year where no one cares who gets the number 1 pick. This is not an Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Zion Williamson draft. This is an Anthony Bennett, Victor Oladipo, Otto Porter draft. And the Hawks, a franchise that has had success. Classic teams in the 80s with Dominique Wilkins, the Joe Johnson Hawks team, the Mike Budenholzer Hawks teams. They've had good teams, but it is a city, a fan base that has just not been rewarded and has not really seemed to care much. It is a Hawks team that has been aggressively mid for 30 years, basically, with a couple little exceptions. A transcendent talent, a Zion Williamson, was able to catapult the New Orleans franchise into a state of relevance above what it, certainly way above what it would have been before, especially post Anthony Davis. The Hawks could have found a similar fate, but in the Hawksiest way possible, they get the great break when the great break doesn't really help them that much. And finally, One of the most prolific winning streaks in sports has come to an end. 20-year-old Rose Zhang won the Cognizant Founders Cup on Sunday, beating out Madeline Sagstrom by 2 strokes. That puts an end to Nelly Corda's record-tying LPGA Tour winning streak of 5 straight tour wins. Corda said she hopes someone else can join Nancy Lopez, Annika Sorenstam, and herself with 5 straight wins, if not even more than that, one day. I hope we see it too. I hope Nelly does it. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports today, will the Cavaliers even the series with the Celtics, even as banged up as they are? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.